So, Flaked. I mean, in a weird way, it's kind of quite nice to have this dramedy back, and I say that despite not really thinking very much of the first season. Will Arnett stars as Chip, a self-styled fount of inspiring advice and supposed reliability who was shown in season 1 to be more of a pathological liar in some respects, and here's a man who's taken a fall for a devastating accident and used that lie to fashion himself into a tragic life guru, dispensing bad guy turned good advice to help him coast through life and get laid. Season 1 was pretty flawed, but broadly watchable, because as an Arnett vehicle, Flaked is that sort of precious rarity. Here is a show, after all, that doesn't just allow Arnett to coast on his gravelly voice and comic timing, but instead drives him to be a little bit more low-key. And although Chip shares the narcissism of many of Arnett's more humorous characters, this is definitely more drama than comedy, and Arnett rises to the challenge, to be honest. Flaked's biggest issue was that the supporting characters, beyond Chip himself, just simply weren't very interesting, especially when it came to his love interest, London. In fact, most of the female characters were just incredibly poorly written. This slightly truncated second season, offering up 6 episodes to the first season's 8, seeks to remedy that by inserting a whole bunch of subplots for the co-stars, and it actually sort of works. Maybe-ish. Before we go any further, do be aware, it's going to get pretty spoilery. Just in case you didn't see the thumbnail, this is going to get spoilery. So I guess one of the best aspects of season 2 is that we get to explore the character of Dennis in a little bit more detail. Everyone in season 1 kind of just existed by virtue of having something to do with Chip, but in season 2 we actually get a sense of who Dennis is beyond the context of his supposed best friend. His relationship with Lenora Critchlow's Rosa is a sweet one, even if the show kind of runs out of time to fully explore the intricacies of emotional damage done by Dennis's own attempts at shielding others from his painful reality. The irony of a recovering alcoholic opening a wine store is kind of realised in its fullest when Dennis falls off the wagon quite spectacularly midway through the season. The result is quite shocking to begin with, his state of being, the store in tatters around him. But I can't help but feel that Flaked never really pushes far enough. Part of the issue with the show is that it never really fully commits to the seriousness of some of its subject matter. There's often a misguided attempt at levity around the corner, really taking the sting out of scenes that could and should be quite devastating. Instead, both fall flat. It's a delicate balance, and I certainly don't mean to say that, big themes must be dealt with in super serious fashion. But Flaked never really commits to the drama enough to fully explore a heartfelt message that feels sincere, and the jokes aren't really good enough to conjure any actual laughs, which is a problem. What we're left with is a mumblecore indie film spread across 6 episodes that isn't really sure what it wants to be. It's sort of half-hearted light comedy 1 minute and half-hearted melodrama the next, and the show completely veers away from sincerity and confrontation. And I mean, part of that is probably purposeful, right? I mean, after all, this is what Chip does. He lies his way into and out of sticky situations, surrounding himself with fabrications so that he never really has to feel or confront anything. But that only really proves interesting for so long. The second season begins with everyone in Venice kind of shunning Chip. But we don't really feel that. We don't really see that. We don't feel the weight of the consequences from his actions from season 1. We don't really feel the weight of his homelessness or desperation. And this is partially because the scripts seem insistent on just forcing in this gentle bicycle-based physical comedy. I just find it really difficult to come away feeling anything about Flaked in particular, simply because, it is easy to watch, but the show's execution, its structure, so closely mirrors the slacker insincerity that is Chip's fatal flaw that it's truly difficult to kind of engage with. And I think this was part of the problem with season 1, and it's magnified in season 2, which doubles down on the drama. It just feels incredibly unbalanced and insincere. And George William Basil's Cooler is kind of a personification of this inconsistency. He's evicted from his house after skipping 6 months in rent, which kind of seems fair enough, and Cooler ends up living out of a tiny Winnebago. His optimism and his bright nature kind of balanced out with the fact that he's not that sharp. He's a bit of a stereotypical dim hippie, to be honest, stumbling through modern life with a heart of gold, and he strikes up a completely unbelievable relationship with this woman from Chip's AA group, Alex, that begins with him pretending to be a plumber and then kind of breaking her shower. And this woman is a single mother. She must be fairly well off. She doesn't necessarily have a whole bunch of time for this sort of shit, and yet she somehow finds it endearing. This somewhat unreliable character turns out to be fairly reliable, I guess, because the script says it's so, but this relationship is completely unbelievable. I don't know, it just comes out left field. It seems like a forced way to develop this subplot, to develop this character that isn't really a character. He's a stereotype. He's a comedic function. He's not really a character. He's just, a walking long hair and bearded punchline, and yet somehow they try and develop him into this kind of sweet, slightly goofy romantic subplot, and it just doesn't work. And this is the thing, once again, the female characters in Flaked are basically just reduced to being plot points and devices. London is really just a barometer of Chip's restlessness, and she eventually flees for home to give Chip someone/something to fight for. Alex is a bed for the night for Chip, and a good thing, I suppose, in the life of Cooler. And even Rosa is kind of really just defined by her relationships with Dennis and her alcoholic father. She's a catalyst for change in the plot arcs of two male characters and doesn't really exist outside of them. And even when London does go home, Chip presumes it's for a man, so she can finally marry her jilted ex-fiancé, when in actual fact it's for another man, her dead brother, the one whom Chip supposedly killed in a drunk driving accident. And herein lies another big issue, the accident at the heart of the show. Since pitching sharply from hipster comedy into melodrama halfway through season 1, we've always really been building up to this point where London finally learns that Chip didn't kill her brother. But the trouble with that is that London isn't really enough of a character for us to even really care about her reaction. And indeed, the show seems to realise this and gives it about 2 minutes in the final episode. And given her questionable motivation for meeting Chip in the first place, i.e. kind of wanting to meet her brother's killer and then somehow, despite a distinct lack of on-screen chemistry and decent writing and logic, falling in love with him, this then leads to a very, very swift, I guess I wasn't the right man for her moment that completely falls flat. It falls flatter than a pancake that's been run over by the car that Chip was supposedly driving. Cut to an outro of Chip riding around pretty aimlessly back in Venice on a bicycle while depressing indie music plays. What have we learned? Nothing. There are constructions that I can point to and acknowledge the effect that they're supposed to have, right? Cooler's thing with Alex is supposed to be sweet, kooky romance. Rose's eventual reconnection with her father should be cathartic, but none of this feels earned. And in the end, although I don't regret watching Flaked from start to finish, it's not a show that's going to linger particularly long in my memory, and it has nothing to do with the pace or the lack of action or, anything like that, to be honest. There are plenty of shows and films that serve as languid, melancholic character studies. Look at Netflix's own Love, actually, as a great example of this. It's just that Flaked isn't very interesting at all. And I get that, the ending, it's fairly brief, it's fairly chill, it's super low-key and downbeat, and that's kind of the atmosphere of the show, but it doesn't provoke an emotional response at all. It's pretty sterile. It's just kind of meh. So yeah, that's my take on Flaked Season 2. What did you guys think? Have you seen it? Did you enjoy it? Are you planning on watching it? What do you think of Season 1? Did you expect the show to get renewed? I know a lot of people were pretty kind of cross about that because they saw it as, this kind of fairly show. So I can actually kind of understand that, but it's been a labour of love for Will Arnett, so, kudos to him for trying, I guess. But I'm going to be looking forward to seeing him in New Arrested Development, to be honest. That's kind of my bag. I'm not saying Will Arnett can't do seriousness. It's really nice to see him in this kind of role. I'm just saying, just make it, find a better character, or like a better story, or just settle on something that you want to say, because I'm not sure what it is out of this. I don't know. what Flaked is trying to do. And it seems like Flaked doesn't know either. So yeah, there are clickables up here. Do check out some of my other stuff. Do hit subscribe and remember to turn on alerts and notifications so you never miss out on a video. Yeah, it's been lovely and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Till then, bye.